Again, good evening, everybody, ladies and gentlemen. You may say good night, but let me allow you to welcome you to this evening's panel discussion. At a recent hearing in Parliament, Mrs. Lauristin, member of the Libe Committee, said EDPS is present everywhere, is omnipresent. It was a compliment, but unless you read it in a different way, I would invite you to stay for, again, half an hour and to go back to last year, since exactly in this room, exactly this time, the EDPS has launched the Ethics Advisory Group, an independent body at an independent institution, so we have enough food for complicated analysis. We deliberately set out this group to be an independent, so although we host their meetings, our assistants prepare coffee, chocolates, and drinks, but we try to allow them to develop their concerns, and therefore, by default, we do not take part in their meetings. So today, 1 year after, I'm delighted to see the members of this group on the stage. They are the real stars of this last panel. Let me go back again to a couple of years ago, a few days after the appointment of Wojciech Wieworowski and I decided to stay a few days at the sea place to relax. It was Christmas time, and I say, no computer, no smartphone, just a couple of books. What a mistake, because the books were related to ethics and dignity in internet. So went back to my office. I tried to share a pile of handnotes with my staff to say it's time we start working on ethics. I will not describe the initial reaction on top of our daily work. And I see that now, 2 years after, and 1 year after the establishment of this group, ethics has become an essential theme in both data protection and privacy area. I've counted at this CDPB round 7 panel events in which ethics is a key word. So it seems ethics has become fashionable, and perhaps ethics is the new accountability. So I'm simply pleased that this initiative, the advisory group, is playing a major role in this promising debate. So we focus at the DPS on short and medium-term challenges. We supervise over 70 European Union institutions, agencies, offices, and bodies, but as also advisor of the EU institutions on all policies related to data protection, we have to ensure compliance with data protection rules and enforce them. So we need to also think in a longer term, in a broader context, and therefore this is why we wanted to create the momentum to reflect on the digital revolution, its impact on society, what it means Article 1 of the treaty, dealing with dignity in the internet, dignity which, differently from fundamental rights and freedoms, if you adhere to the school of thought that dignity is something different, does not tolerate apparently any interference, though proportionate. So we want to build upon compliance, and therefore we would like to go beyond mere compliance. And therefore I'm proud to have chosen eminent philosophers, researchers, and also geeks to join the ethics group, Antoinette Rouvroy, Aurélie Pauls, Luciano Floridi, Jeroen van der Hoven, and Peter Burgess. And Raegan MacDonald from Mozilla will kindly ensure that they will make this latest exercise this day, interesting enough for all of you. The group is chaired by another member, Jeroen Lanier. He will contribute to this discussion via a pre-recorded interview. So I can simply now stay silent and hand over to Raegan and encourage you to be curious and to ask for 1 million euros, pounds, dollars questions. Enjoy the panel.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Giovanni. And hi, everyone. Just to emphasize what Giovanni had said about ethics being a trendy thing this year, that is absolutely right. And I think it's a testament for you guys to leave your drinks after a long day of conferencing to come and talk about digital ethics. And after the 2 days at Cpdp, it's not hard to see why the conversation about digital ethics and ethics in the context of data protection has become so relevant. So when we talk about big data, it doesn't seem like that concept even accounts for what we're really actually talking about, which is more like infinite data. That more decisions about us are being made by machines, and those decisions are based on inferences based on this infinite amount of data. That technology is so ubiquitous, it feels that we're not only living in the computer, but the line between what is human and what is machine raises a lot of important questions about what we mean when we say intelligent machine. And finally, in a universe where data drives decision-making and where data generates enormous amounts of profits, those that control that data have an enormous amount of power. And so those are some of the themes, I think, of what today's panel is about. It's new responsibilities in ethics and law. And I'm Mozilla's lead on EU public policy, based here in Brussels. Mozilla is an organization that builds open source tools and open source products, most well known as the Firefox web browser, but we're also a global community of engineers and makers and hackers that are mission driven. And so one of those principles that drives us in the building of our products, in our policies, in our initiatives, is that privacy should be treated as fundamental and not optional. And so at Mozilla, we're constantly wrangling with a lot of these issues of how technology is changing that go beyond compliance, of ticking a box to say, yes, we gave a consent box, but really thinking about how to put people in control and how that is becoming more complicated. And so just to start off, I wanted to underline what Giovanni has said in the introduction, that this exercise and thinking about ethics and data is really intended to reinforce and not replace laws. It's also much more broader than simply looking at a narrow area of companies and compliance. But when we say responsibilities, we mean that this is a more responsibilities for individuals, for societies, for public entities, for democracies. So I think that the theme is a bit much more broad. And so I am thrilled to be the moderator, to be moderating this eminent panel of rock stars, range from ethicists to philosophers, legal experts, and we want to have a discussion today to give you insight into some of the issues that these panelists have been chewing on for the past year, and some of the topics that will appear in the interim report and the final report to be delivered in 2018. And so with that, before we launch into discussion here, we have one panelist, Jeroen Lanier, who will be joining us through a pre-recorded interview. So I think we can start with him, with his intervention, and then we can kick it off here, if that's.
Hello, Cpdp 2017. and greetings to the eminent panellists in this evening's debate. As a sort of tribute to the theme of this year's CPDP, we will be using some intelligent machines to welcome another visionary in the field, Mr. Jeroen Lanier, to tonight's discussions via Skype. Thank you for joining us, Jeroen.
Hello, thanks for having me.
Jeroen, you're a pioneer, one of the creators of our digital reality. Everyone's talking about artificial intelligence, either as the savior or destroyer of the world as we know it. What's your view?
Artificial intelligence started out as a rhetorical device, actually, to criticize one of the earliest pioneers of computers, Norbert Wiener, who had called things cybernetics. And it turned into sort of a sales technique of imagining that computers have become alive. In my view, it's nothing but a fantasy. You can take any device and pretend it's alive or not. For instance, Adam Smith pretended money was alive and called it the invisible hand. Sometimes it's useful to have that fantasy, perhaps, but we must never forget that it is only a fantasy. The moment you really believe the technology is alive, then you have to respect it. You have to give it rights. You have to treat it ethically as if it were another creature. And at that point, you can no longer be an engineer. At that point, you can no longer design it. At that point, you can no longer define criteria because it's its own criteria, and then engineering becomes nonsense. So I think AI is great in the movies, but as a technique for selling technology, which has become pervasive, it's actually quite destructive, and it makes engineers into poor engineers. There's no reason to be afraid of it. The only thing to be afraid of is engineers who no longer believe that they're in charge of their own technology because they've turned it into a god. That is the great danger.
Okay, thanks. So I would like to actually take that same question to Antoinette. What do you think and what do you perceive as the risks for AI? Is it the boon or the bane of society?
Indeed, I completely agree with what Jeroen Lanier says. I think one of the risks is our propensity to animism and to throw or to waver our responsibility for taking decisions, for making sense of the world, for interpreting the world to automatic machines. The temptation is high to consider that machines and that through data mining, the availability of big data and the unprecedented ability that we have to give kind of a new kind of signification to the world through analysis of digital data, the temptation is high of believing that we have at last reached the point where we don't need human representation anymore, and we can emancipate ourselves from even from human language to give meaning to the world, that machines will provide meaning for us and will even predict what will happen to us and will even make projects for us, as if they were sorcerers or gods. I don't know. There's a kind of animism. And I think instead of that, we really need foresight. And foresight is not just detecting tendencies of technology development. It's rather like Gaston Berger called it. It's the art or the practice not only of detecting trends, but inventing our future and deciding and taking in charge the ethical burden and the uncertainty of the future, and deciding what to do in front of uncertainty, and accept that some things are just escaping calculation, that there is a part of the world, a part of our activities, a part of our destiny that really exceeds all kinds of computation, all kinds of predictions. And no, these machines, we tend to believe that these machines will spare us the burden of confronting ourselves with the choice and the collective, the personal and collective choices that we have to make.
Okay, so big danger is that we have delegated our responsibility and our decision-making to the machines, which can be extremely problematic. Luciano, I would like to hear your take on that. What do you think about the dangers of AI? I'm going to make you guys not speak for very long, so sorry, I'll be cutting off.
Given the fact that we all had a bit of wine, I'm sure you will allow me to be relaxed and therefore enjoy for a moment a bit of dialectical friction with what has been said so far, meaning total disagreement. And that dialectical friction is due to the following point. All we have to remember is the alphabet, the book, the computer. We learn how to record something for the future, and as writing. At some point, we invent a way of distributing, and as communication, book, radio, TV, and as another stage. And at some point, we invent something that processes the data automatically, independently, with us not on the loop, not even there. These are 3 steps that anyone, not the colleagues, of course, but anyone else who, in a different room, would have the temptation to undermine and say, oh, no, of course, it's just a fantasy. Relax more, because we will take care of your future. And see, that kind of discourse finds me a little bit sort of worried. I think we should be concerned. We should be concerned about what this automatic processing is doing for us instead of us, when we will get there, but it's time to take care of it. So I'm not completely sure that fantasizing about a fantasy will take care of the real issues that we have today.
Thank you. It's good that there are differences of opinion here. I think that's what makes this group so dynamic. And the world would be very boring if we all thought the same way. Peter, do you want to?
First of all, I can confirm that there's some differing opinions in the group, which is only welcome and productive. I really wanted to comment on Jeroen's comment as well, and I'm really glad that we could bring him on board. He's a wonderful contribution to the group. As you can see, there's kind of a spirit in his way of expressing himself, which we welcome. And I really agree with him in one sense, and I disagree with him in another. I agree with him in the sense that artificial intelligence is a nonsense expression. If there's one thing that cannot be defined as artificial, it's intelligence. It's somehow the basis of what is actually organic and natural and the most human. So I think that expression, which he is critical of, is problematic. Sure, there are a wide range of functions, activities that can be replicated by machines, human activities that can be replicated by machines. But somewhere we come to the end of that range of possibilities and there's something left, something irreducibly human. And I'll bet it's something that Jeroen would call love or kindness. On the other hand, where I disagree with him, is that I think that machines do have agency in our time. That there is an effect of intelligence in machines that are so highly complex that we cannot see through their logic, see their algorithm behind the black box. So there is something which is not agency in the old-fashioned sense, but there's an effect of agency. There's an effect of intelligence where we do respect machines in the way that Jeroen was talking about, where we do recognize them. And there's something that marks our time, which is this new experience of machines as somebody that we need to have to deal with, even if it's not in the rigorous human sense.
So if we put the realness or the artificialness of intelligence into question and think about machines having agency, does that mean, as Jeroen had sort of hinted to, that in maybe 5 CPDPs from now we'll be talking about robot rights? Is that potentially?
Potentially.
That was also, I'm making a joke, I know. Yeah. Okay, I want to go to more about the adding the ethics to the debate about compliance and legal framework. So we have another question that we interviewed Jeroen for that we can loop him in. So maybe we can do that and then we can go to discussion. So number 2.
The internet is an ecosystem of different players interacting. Jeroen, how do you determine responsibility in such an environment? Can ethics help?
Yeah, it's interesting because if you say ethics, sometimes it can elicit a negative response in Silicon Valley because people believe that some sort of dispassionate algorithmic optimization in the world is better than old-fashioned ideas about ethics. In my view, maybe an even more basic word like kindness is what we need. What we need to try to do is remember that even if it seems as though we're having no impact on people, and that might be a government actor or an individual or anybody, we actually do affect each other in the world, and we have to find a way to acknowledge that. Right now, the whole internet is designed to make everything free and weightless and instant, and in a sense, it removes that sense of responsibility. And I think we've made a mistake in creating it that way. I think that's the wrong fantasy. Weightlessness makes you into an asshole, if I can say that at a formal and dignified meeting. I'm sorry, I'm an American.
Weightlessness makes you into an asshole. I like that. Does anyone want to actually directly respond to his response on this panel before, or not? Okay.
No, first and foremost, I was surprised to hear him say that the internet is free and weightless because, of course, it's never been that. Maybe that was the fantasy of the founders, but it's always been limited and fragmented and unequal access and unequal bandwidth and unequal speed. So it's never been something like that.
So moving into the question of ethics as a value add to data protection in particular, what would you say, Aurélie, what does the ethics perspective add or could benefit on things like the GDPR, which would include, for instance, like specific challenges that you've identified that an ethics perspective could improve?
I think in the long term, if we move from compliance towards ethics, or we try to encapsulate that one way or another, I think there are interesting aspects of ethics that can help companies think beyond pure compliance and propose for the future, start building for the future. And I'm more of the pragmatic here inside the philosophers' discussions, and it's indeed very interesting to hear different points of views. But what I see today is that while companies are struggling to achieve compliance one way or another, I think ethical considerations can help them build towards the future as well. So see what might come down the line in terms of legislation, but also just generally do the right thing for the future. So I've seen companies stuck in certain developments because they just wanted to be compliant. And I think ethics is a way to embrace that, to build towards what might be coming. And it's also the storm Giovanni was talking about in the other panel before that. So the only issue that I currently see is that this idea that in general, companies do the right thing if they can, if it doesn't hold a cost, but will not do it in the short term if it does. And so it's trying to find right ways of working in order to ensure that it would be beneficial for them either in the short term or the long term. And that's where maybe there's more work to be done on different levels, not only on the ethical level.
And to take that even more, I think, to a practical level, what are some of the ways, Jeroen, that you can see not only the value of an ethics perspective, but how ethics can innovate in the context of compliance and GDPR?
I was about to say, in response to Aurélie, being very pragmatic, I like that stance very much, because if you give ethics to a couple of philosophically inclined panelists, then they turn it into something very special. But it is something that we're doing all day. We're looking at each other, we're assessing and evaluating each other, and people suffer, they're harmed, they're discriminated against, they are exploited, they're manipulated. There are gross inequities and injustices. That's the world of ethics. And we are building a digital society And we want that digital society to be fair, to be equitable, to be just, to be privacy respecting, etc. We've already agreed that it's a very complex matter, and therefore our ethics needs to be recalibrated. We need to rethink ethics in the 21st century. It's no longer enough to do analysis, to do theory, which philosophers like a lot. They have to bring it down to engineering. They have to bring it down to new products. And this is exactly where the innovation comes in, because if you start to think about ethical values in terms of requirements for design, then you suddenly are confronted by huge, a task. You need it to be democratic, equitable, just, privacy respecting, transparent, accountable. You want to allocate responsibilities, all of these things at the same time. And therefore you need to think of something really clever. And that is exactly what we refer to in Europe, and I'm very happy that that has become, let's say, a dominant discourse of responsible innovation. That is, innovating, adding new functionality, whether it's AI, whether it's new analytical techniques, whether it is quantum computing, that needs to be thought of and considered from the point of view of what is that adding to a good society. And of course, we know that this will not happen automatically. And therefore, we need to convene and have, conferences like this, because if we leave it to Silicon Valley, it will not happen. And but important is to stress that we need to help ourselves to a different conception of ethics.
So recalibrating ethics and thinking about how to distribute responsibility. Peter, do you have a take on that?
Yeah, I just wanted to confirm or agree with you that as we see it, everybody's doing ethics all the time in a certain sense. And one of the themes we've discussed in the group is indeed how can we best provide tools, concepts, a grammar, a set of experiences so that we can raise the level of ethics analysis among citizens and in the private sphere as well.
I want to give an opening for anyone in the audience. If anyone is inclined to ask a question or if you want to share any comments. If not right now, just walk up to the microphones and so you can participate in the conversation as well. Okay, so if there's no questions from the audience, then...
there is one question.
Oh,
two.
Oh, sorry, there's two hands. Sorry. So
don't
please
be shy.
go. You can go to one of the mics. So, thanks.
My name is Rob van Hoven. I'm teaching robot rights. You're welcome to join the group tomorrow at 4 o'clock on legal rights for robots.
See, I was right.
Yeah, you were right. So study the program, then you know. And I really am anxious to know this discussion you have here and you have within your group. How do you communicate it to the rest of Europe, to the citizens? You're talking about the citizens, but the citizens don't know. How do you communicate it with them? And how important is it conceived by the public? How do you market this kind of product?
That's a great question, and I was actually going to transition us to the user and to thinking about the individual and how either these practices are impacted by them. But maybe if we want to start with the gentleman's question more specifically about what kind of work you guys are doing and how this would impact, particularly the ethics advisory group, how that will impact the individual.
I mean, one aspect of having impact is the very initiative by itself. I thought that when I read the opinion for the first time, I knew about it of putting ethics on the agenda. I thought that was there's a great move, I think, and very important one. So that I think is in and by itself very important. Is a signal to the rest of the world. And of course, Europe is a special place in this respect, and the world is looking at what we're doing. We're setting standards, and if you go this way, I think that is also quite separate from the content of what we deliver. I mean, what we deliver or what we come up with in the end, you know, the proof of that will be in the eating, whether people like what they see once we start to share that. You know, so this is just an introduction of our group, but not the...
I think there are two aspects here. I think if I understand correctly the question, it's the first one is the marketing of what we do and the result of it. And the other one is the definition of ethics of the user. This idea of how can we talk about ethics while we're actually talking about what people consider to be ethical uses of data, of AI or whatever. So maybe that's an open door for you guys to react.
I wonder whether I could add to the relevant question the following comment. There are often two problems with marketing something. When you don't market it, and since we're here, that problem is avoided. So not doing ethics at all has already been solved. The other problem is to do it too early. And sometimes that means being precautious, not having time to think carefully about what you're doing. And since we are here and we think that the things that we're doing are very serious, it would be a pity if we were to rush in marketing, a word that I don't find very appropriate in ethics, but let's say, marketing to Europeans what we think. So essentially, we're doing it properly, which means we're doing it slowly, contrary to what people might expect, rushing for a solution, for example, about robot rights.
May I add? Sure. I completely agree with all that has been said, and I would add that there is a specific temporality for reflexive thinking and ethics in particular. And one of the roles, from my own perspective, of ethics is precisely to interrupt the flows and to interrupt that dictator of the real time. We do not reflect to stimuli. No, we pose the stimuli. We reflect on things which matter, not stimuli, not quantifiable stimuli. And what is lacking today, what is threatened by the current technological evolution and its intake by the general public and by governance as well, is precisely the rarefaction of spaces and time for reflexivity. Real time is not an inhabited time. It's a time where humans cannot exist. We exist in duration. And to make that duration exist and to inhabit it and to reflect into it, we need not to be exposed all the time, and we need not to emit stimuli all the time for having reflex responses to us. And I think that's something that may be unfashionable today, but it's something that is really crucially needed.
Yeah, Peter, I know you want to say something, but I think that makes a lot of sense. I was thinking, if we're thinking about making ethics something that people understand or something that becomes the new trend, I mean, I think the risk, and that's what I understand from Antoinette, is what if it becomes another buzzword? Or will it become another buzzword that people don't quite understand or know how to act or impact their agency and control to really fully understand what's going on? Peter, did you want to?
Nothing. I'd much rather talk about interrupting the flows, but if you're interested in just concretely speaking what our instruments are, we're preparing an interim report, as was mentioned, which will be finished before the summer, and that'll lead to a final report early next year, which will be public. And in addition, you can follow news about us on the webpage of the EDPS, the blog. There's a Twitter feed as well. So there will be. It's not a secret society by any means.
Thank you.
No, we don't need that. No,
we don't need
we're not pulling that up.
That was not.
But coming back to your objection or observation that ethics could become a kind of ethics washing, we have seen that very often, of course. And IT industry is now big time moving into ethics, and Apple and Google and Facebook are now having, ethics groups, and these are secret societies because we don't know exactly what they are doing, right? But I think it's important, therefore, coming back to the point of being very pragmatic, that we have to bring ethics down. We have to build new institutions. We have to build ways of modi operandi to check and to make sure that it's not just a greenwashing or an ethics washing operation, because we'll be following people and checking upon what they claim, So and of course we saw that happen also in the environmental world, where people saying, we're doing this, we're doing that, we're not polluting. Then we have ways of institutions and mechanisms put in place that will validate those claims, and therefore, you cannot leave it up in the air. You have to be very specific and practical, and then other people will be able to hold you to account.
So making ethics, finding new responsibilities, new actors, and then making those actors,
Absolutely,
making it enforceable.
And even in and by itself, the fact that people haven't given thought, very specific thought, to how they would allocate responsibilities is a bad sign. Because in light of the grave consequences, they should have thought about these meta issues.
They should have, but they didn't.
But they didn't. And that's a signal that tells us something.
Is there agreement on this panel, or does anyone want to respond to Jeroen, or do you agree? Okay. We can take another question from the audience, if there is one. Please.
Ladies first.
I need to do that.
I know the mics are so high, but...
On the question of the artificial intelligence and the way that they can be dangerous, I just wanted to submit a question. On a daily basis, I use a GPS navigator in my car. It's far more intelligent than me. He knows all the roads, he knows the traffic. I could never reach his intelligence. But that doesn't mean I'm in danger because I let him decide where to go. Because he's actually not deciding where to go. He's assisting me and helping me to find the best road to take. If he tells me to do a U-turn on a motorway, it's up to me to say, hey, I'm on a motorway. He's a machine and he doesn't know. So I would not follow him. In a general base, I think what ethics should bring us is to remind us that machines is helping and assisting. The brain is a human brain. The machine so far hasn't been intelligent enough to project my decision in the future. This still belongs to me. The danger is an over-reliance on technology, not only for artificial intelligence, but for any machine decision. There should be a human in charge of the final decision. And whenever we are taking legislation or we are thinking about anything on the ethics, we have to remember to project that far enough for future generation and not only for the situation that we are in. The evolution of technology is fast-paced. If we look at Google and the right to be delisted, we should look at it for this new generation who have all their private life online published. We should not only look at us, what we want from Google to index or not index. And this is probably the challenge of the future, is to project faster and further.
Could I?
Thank you. Yes, absolutely.
Quick
Luciano,
comment.
sure.
Would you like to go first?
No, go ahead, go ahead.
I probably agree with most of what you said, but remember that the stone, when hit by the drop, will say, I'm not changing. And then the drop will come and come again, and will drive the stone crazy, and will drill a big hole in the drop through the stone. So you have already used the word intelligence to describe a GPS. AI has already made a difference to the way you perceive the world. You perceive a GPS as intelligent. You actually said it's more intelligent than me, something that 10 years ago we would have thought, are you insane? It's a GPS. So remember that what AI is doing to us, it's not Terminator or stuff like that, but it's slowly, quietly modifying the way we think, the way the world is, the way we interact with the world, the way we conceive ourselves, the way we interact with each other. Now, that can be for good, it could be for bad, but it would be let's say, not very philosophical to think, oh, just because it's slow and quiet and silent and it will take maybe 10, 20, 100 years, it's not happening. It is quietly happening. And therefore, since we live much more in a digital universe where AI is the fish and we are scuba diving, then inevitably we are the ones who are adapting to those gadgets. So next time I am driven by the GPS that way to go there rather than that way to go there, who is in control of whom? So I think we should be a little bit more careful, not about Terminator and the singularity, that is science fiction. I wish that were the problem. But about the real changes that are happening on a daily basis everywhere, which are not so perceivable and therefore way more misleading.
Yes.
Yes. Thank you. I completely agree, of course, with Luciano, but I present the things in a bit different way. I think these artifacts which are perceptual mediations, in fact, they are changing our cognition. We are not the same. We are not thinking in the same way when we see not only the road which is in front of us, but when we perceive at the same time all the roads that we don't see with our eyes. So the challenge of today is to think not of human and machines as if they inhabited different universes which never cross their path, but rather to think that to realize that machines are learning from us. When your GPS orients you on the basis of the trajectories of other users. So they are learning from human behaviors. And we are learning from the machines as well. We are learning to respond in reflex way, to obey the machine, to go the way they indicate us, and so on. And we are attuned to do that because we are lazy. We are lazy, and it's practical as well. So I think machines are not magic and they're not separated from us. And maybe one thing that we have to, but that's my personal opinion, it's not representative of the group, but one thing that maybe prevents us sometimes from advancing in our evaluation of this artificial intelligence is our predisposition to see machines and humans as separated, and to regret nostalgically a time which never existed, where humans were living without machines and artifacts. I think we have to think of how to deal with our composite agency, and how to master our increasingly composite agency. We are composed with machinic cognition as well. So I think that's the challenge of the day. From my point of view, it's very subjective. I don't want to.
It's certainly one of the most fascinating topics that you guys are working on, is this line between man and machine, or human and machine, and at what point they are kind of combined, and who is controlling whom and who is learning from whom. That's, I think, the other value of this perspective is also that it's very long term. And sometimes laws, especially in a legislative environment, it's not always very long-term thinking, it's very short-term. So those are definitely very, very interesting questions that we should all be asking ourselves. But I see there's 3 people in line for questions, so we'll go to the next question.
I'll keep this quick. I'm Colin Bennett from the University of Victoria in Canada. I'd really be interested in your reflections on the dilemma that's been sort of the animating debate at conferences like this for the last 30 years, which is the appropriate balance between privacy and surveillance. I think there's a rich debate or a rich set of questions about the extent to which and in what ways an ethical analysis or the addition of an ethical framework can help us make more effective judgments in this new world about what is legitimate surveillance and what is illegitimate surveillance. I'd be interested in any reflections you have on how the framework that you're struggling with helps us make judgments on those critical questions which are in some way better than or more advanced than this word called privacy, which is, of course, the title of this conference.
Yeah, my first response to that question is a very important, central question. I agree with you. It's been coming back to the innovation and trying to balance and juggle those different opposing and conflicting values. Is this? I'm not implying that all problems and all conflicting values can be solved in this particular way, but I think it's a very promising avenue, and that's the trying to design the world in such a way that you can have your cake and eat it, that you can benefit from the functionality that IT can offer, whether it's big data or a quantum computer or whatever, AI. So we want that. I mean, many examples in healthcare, in other areas where we can greatly benefit, we can save lives by applying it. We have an obligation to do it. But it comes with certain, negative consequences, and we want to mitigate them. We want to introduce and use the technology in such a way that we don't have those negative privacy or other consequences. And there are many good examples of how we can do that. I think we can push that further. I think I've seen research across Europe, especially Europe, very, very clever and smart solutions to have the functionality without the detrimental privacy consequences. And I think companies and governments should invest more in that. I'm not implying that all problems can be solved in this way, but I think we can push it much further. And even not only by design up front, so designing the infrastructure in your software in such a way that the likelihood of privacy violations goes down, but also ex post. Right, so a group in PISA is doing wonderful work on discrimination detection, right? So applying big data to see whether patterns where people have been doing things they could only have done because they knew things that they were not allowed to know about. So that we can. So that's interesting, So that's I think we should do that. Yeah.
Luciano, you wanted to say?
That was a very good question, and I have what I hope is going to be a short comment and a potential suggestion of a kind of solution that one may consider. The comment is the following. What the digital has done to us in terms of human rights is to show that they don't get along. For a long time, we used the human rights on a single line. Imagine just a line where all the human rights are dots. And they never met. It's like a party we never had. We thought they were all friends. And then we put them in the same room, and they don't get along at all. Now, security and privacy, freedom of speech and privacy, self-determination, look the other side of the Atlantic, and freedom of speech. And they're all something that we want, but they don't get along nicely because the digital has erased the boundaries that the analog was keeping nicely in place. So different boxes, good, right there, but now the digital is mixing everything together. So that kind of foundational crisis shows that we need a new architecture, a bit of layering of those rights. The only layering you find in the Declaration of Human Rights is actually an external point of view, which is human dignity, and then the rights are all the same. You don't sort of put them, this is more important, that is less important. I think what we're learning is that that sort of importance could be negotiated, and that's the second point, in terms of time, for example. And this is just an example. I'm not saying this is a good solution. I'm saying that's the taste of what a solution could look like. Maybe it's the wrong one, but at least shows the direction. Think in terms of a time of real war, Second World War, when you stop the press and its freedom of speech because the security of the nation is at stake. Well, that sort of suspension is temporary. Time intervenes. It will be re-established the moment you're no longer at war. So as long as, for example, we have that time dimension in turning on and off privacy for some reasons, freedom of speech for some reasons, security for some reasons, then I think the population, people, would come to some kind of agreement. So, okay, I can give up this for this 6 months, but then you give it back to me because the job has been done. What we cannot accept is the security from now onwards. And I'm talking from the UK. From now onwards, your rights are gone. Well, that is unacceptable. But that's where time could actually give a bit of hand. Just an example. I'm not saying it's a good solution, just a taste.
Thank you. We're really almost at the time stop, but I know there's three of you, so if I can ask you to try to keep it brief.
I had one question, and now Luciano has made me think of another question instead, so I'll ask that one.
I know, we could be here all night.
Yeah. So is it really a case that we ever had any separation? I'm thinking of Warren and Brandes, the right to privacy, is basically describing the idea of privacy as a right, as a fundamental right that enables the ability to have human dignity by enabling personality rights, the growth of your autonomy. So is it more the case of looking at rather that rights that had been separated, instead rights that enable each other, and when one particular right is in danger of being destroyed, then we change the balance a bit until we make sure that for instance, the freedom of speech, if other rights are being absolutely threatened by that, then we change the balance rather than saying these are separate and now we have to consider taking one away for a little while. Does that make sense at all? It's the wine.
Yes, it makes sense in the context of digital ethics. Okay, I think because we're running out of time, I'd like to take three, and if we can keep that question in mind, and then I'll let the panelists address all three.
Good evening. First of all, I would like to thank you for this fascinating debate, and it has been fascinating not because we had some nice wine before, but I have a question which relates to the current buzz that is in Brussels, and everyone talks about ethics and digital ethics. And at one of the panels yesterday, it was suggested that ethics is a primary concern when implementing the GDPR. And my question to the panelists, or to some of the panelists, is to what extent we should consider ethics as a matter of GDPR implementation. I have another question, which I will probably, I hope to hear more about views of panelists on their take on digital ethics, but perhaps that can be done in their preliminary report. Thank you.
Thank you.
In the context of commercialization of academic research in digital fields, particularly artificial intelligence, do the panel think that one of the root causes is the normative ethical frame of shareholder value, which is adopted by commercial interests, and which Jack Welch famously described as the dumbest idea in the world, compared to other normative models such as stakeholder theory or social contract theory? Where do we need to be pushing the dial in terms of all the great research that's being done in a university context, and then they take those clever ideas and they meet the real world, and then really bad things happen in the real world?
Okay, thank you. So I propose, since we're basically at time, we had three questions. One about digital ethics for implementation guidance for the GDPR. The first one, which I understand was about rights and how to recalibrate or balance, if at all. And then which ethical frame, which theory to apply and when. So I would ask the panelists, you can choose which question you want to answer. You can answer all three, but I ask that you try to answer in tweet form, which means very, very, very short.
On digital ethics, I think ethics, or whether you call it digital ethics, forms a kind of a resource for interpreting and bringing further the concepts in the GDPR, open concepts, open norms that need to be interpreted, and we need to help ourselves to a rich context to give a meaning that makes sense in light of all the values that we have, the human rights that we have, and the problems that we see arise in society. So.
Well done. Very good.
144 exactly. The perspective we're operating with, or that we've advanced to in the group on the GDPR, is I think that we neither want to supplant it or even compete with it, but rather provide a set of perspectives that can strengthen it by looking into the future, by providing concepts and a vocabulary that would help us to interpret it in a richer and more supple way, and one that would be able to follow the technological progress, advances that are coming that are on the horizon.
Wonderful. Just a small word about that. The relation of ethics with regard to GDPR's implementation. I think the role I see that ethics has with regard to law is, again, it's my own view, sorry. And I'm a lawyer, so I'm preaching against my own chapel here. But I think ethics can be subversive of the law sometimes, in the sense that through ethical reflection and analysis, we can identify, locate and describe the problems that, in fact, are not met by the new legal regime, and there are a lot of problems which are not dealt with, such as all the problems which are raised by the huge intensive profiling on the basis of non-personal data, for example. That's not covered. So it's quite interesting maybe to have ethical discussions about these areas of activity, interactions, and problems which are for the moment not dealt with by the legal regime, in order to identify those and allow a public debate about these issues. And then maybe the legislator can take the issues again and make the law live. That's a question for the living metabolism of law, in fact. And I just want to say a very small word about whether we would apply a rule-based ethics or something else. I think I don't have an answer to that. But what I notice is that, in fact, we inherit of principles which are still valid: human dignity, autonomy, beneficence, no maleficence, etc. But when observing the real world of the connected society, we can notice that new values emerge, which are much more collective, in fact, such as collaboration, access, openness, and all these kinds of things. And I think part of our work, as I see it, is also to have a reflexive work on ethical principles themselves, in order not to change them, but to enrich them, to give them more meaning in the new context we are in.
Thank you, Antoinette. That was more of a Facebook post, but that's okay. We'll accept it.
Okay, I'll also try to be very, very short. I should try to be very short. Again, ethics and the GDPR, ethics and law. As you know, games are divided into groups. Games for which rules are constitutive, chess. Games for which rules are constraining, football. In both cases, there are legal moves. How well you play according to those rules, that's a different story. So ethics comes before the rules to set up those rules rather than others. It comes during the exercise of the rules to play well rather than badly. And it comes after, in order to change the rules if you don't like them. So ethics is before, during, and after the GDPR. Before, we've done it. During, here we are. After, we will be having this conversation for 10 years at least.
Thank you. Aurélie?
Yeah, maybe building on that as well. I know when we started the entire discussion, the entire group, Giovanni told us, build on top of the GDPR. Basically, that was the general idea. And it was interesting to see certain of the presentations, for example, yesterday about compliance related to the GDPR in the digital realm, where somebody talked about the slippery slope. And that's also something Antoinette was talking about the fact that, well, you know, there's the law, but then there's interpretation of the law. And this is what you see all through the entire conference now. It's like, we have the legal text. What are we going to do about it? So this is really about this idea of, okay, building beyond and addressing this slippery slope with the different actors within this data ecosystem, and how data is going to be passed from one actor to another. How is this going to be defined when we imagine, I think, around that? So that is going to be interesting, and that's what we're partially debating as well. The other question, which was from Derek, and happy birthday, by the way. I hope you're enjoying yourself. The drinks are on the Edps.
And
this
Mozilla.
discussion as well about, stakeholder value, maximization of stakeholder value, which is our world in general. And where we're seeing that basically inside this entire discussion about compliance, well, consumers are not really there. And this is, forced by this idea of ad blockers and the loss of trust and things like that. This is, I think, something we're trying to address here as well, is trying to redefine this ecosystem of actors and bring, the consumers back inside the loop as well, and trying to understand how they might understand ethics and things like that. So it's building beyond, I think, the GDPR, and it's a complicated task, to say the very least. So I'll just say
thank you.
I think we have time just for a very final and short tweet to say that they just started. So agree that this is the moment, not the moment for marketing. They will release an interim draft report on a basis also the results of a second workshop dedicated to philosophers, dreamers, everybody else than lawyers. Access by lawyers will be strictly prohibited. Then we will have a round of, let's say, call for papers or public consultation, so it will be a transparent process, although we respect their full independence. I take this opportunity to confirm that they are not remunerated, they are appreciated volunteers for such a work. By the end of the year and early next year, let's say a consolidated interim report will be published for a second round. We applied as EDPS to host in Brussels, October next year, the 40th edition of the International Conference of Privacy and Data Protection Commissioners. The Executive Committee of the International Conference is still working on our application. We count to go public by February this year to announce that we finally got the nomination. The event will be dedicated exactly on the ethical implication. And you have seen that we are on the right track. The variety of positions, nuances will simply contribute to offer the conference the best we can achieve. We are really ambitious of this event. We will not have any panel. We will not have at that time speakers or panelists. It will be a public debate, web stream all around the world, and therefore I can simply ask you to contribute to this exercise, which is not performed in an isolated tower. Paul, thank you so much for allowing us to do some preliminary marketing on all these events. Thank you very much to Mozilla for supporting us today. Thank you, of course, to distinguished members of this advisory group. But let me say thank you very much to the fantastic EDPS team who has been working, largely ladies sitting on this first row. It's thanks to them that we are here today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good. Okay.